Imagine being on a mission to keep global waters safe back in the late 1800s. That's exactly what Britain's Mediterranean fleet was up to. They were the ultimate protectors of a super important trade route between Britain and India, but they had some major concerns. France and Italy's navies were giving them a hard time. So, they assembled an elite force with the most powerful ships, around 8 battleships and 3 massive cruisers. On June 22, 1893, this impressive fleet was busy with yearly training exercises near modern-day Lebanon, specifically Tripoli. These drills were vital for staying battle-ready, but little did they know, disaster was lurking beneath the surface. A shipwreck that would go down in history as one of the worst ever, and recent discoveries inside the wreckage have sent shockwaves worldwide. Buckle up, folks. Today we're going to uncover the mind-blowing story behind this catastrophic shipwreck and explore how its remnants still pose a threat today. Now, you might be wondering what led to such a massive maritime disaster. Well, it all starts with Vice Admiral Sir George Tryon, a no-nonsense commander who demanded the highest standards from his crew. He believed that the key to an unbeatable fleet lay in relentless training. Think of it as boot camp at sea. But back then, communication wasn't as seamless as we're used to. Sailors relied on old-school methods like signal flags, semaphore, and even lanterns to get orders across. Tryon wanted something better, so he introduced the TA system, a game-changing ship-handling technique that allowed for complex maneuvers with just a few commands. Little did they know, this innovative method would play a major role in one of history's most infamous shipwrecks. So, let's dive deeper into what went wrong on that fateful day in 1893. When the TA flag was hoisted, all ships were expected to fall in line behind the flagship, following its every move without hesitation. It was a high-stakes game of naval tag. Tryon was convinced his approach would keep his sailors sharp and safe, but we now know that's not exactly how it played out. In fact, this unconventional training method had some major kinks that would soon surface. Fast forward to June 1893, when Vice Admiral Sir George Tryon put his fleet through its paces off the coast of Beirut. He was pushing the limits with a daring maneuver, trying to squeeze just 400 yards between 2 columns of ships, an extremely tight squeeze by any standard. Now, let's get to what really went down in those high-stakes maneuvers off Beirut. Tryon was dead set on his vision, despite some serious reservations from his officers about safety and a more cautious approach that initially planned for a much wider gap between the ships. He wanted HMS Victoria, his flagship, to lead the charge with just 6 cables length, which is roughly 1,000 meters, an extremely tight squeeze by any standard. At precisely 15 o'clock, Tryon gave the order to execute the complex turn. But there was a catch. This maneuver relied on a phrase that hadn't even been formally agreed upon beforehand. With the entire fleet in motion and no clear protocol in place, the risk of collisions skyrocketed. Things got even more complicated as Tryon ordered the starboard column's ships to maintain their positions relative to each other, meaning they'd essentially swap places without changing formation. This added another layer of complexity, raising the danger level even higher. Here's a rewritten version with an energetic tone and simple language. But here's the thing, some historians think Tryon might have actually meant for one division to turn outside the other, creating some space between them. If they started with 2 columns just 200 yards apart and took an outside turn with a massive turning circle of almost 3/4 of a mile, they'd end up about 400 yards apart after the whole shebang. But this plan would have required some fancy footwork. One column needed to turn at a different time or speed than the other. Now Tryon's flag lieutenant, Lord Guilford, gave the deadly order for both divisions to make a 16-point turn inward, and it's clear in hindsight that this was a recipe for disaster. Despite some officers being aware of Vice Admiral Sir George Tryon's plans, not a single person spoke up against it. Even Rear Admiral Markham, who led the other column, hesitated to signal back that he understood the crazy order, which would have put him at risk as well. Here's a rewritten version with an energetic tone and simple language. So, Tryon noticed things were taking too long and the fleet was heading straight for the shore. He needed a quick turnaround. He sent Markham an urgent signal via semaphore. "What are you waiting for?" And just like that, Markham gave the order to turn his column around. Some top officers from both flagships later spilled the beans. They had secretly been hoping Tryon would bail them out at the last minute and avoid this disaster altogether. But it was too late. The columns kept on turning straight into each other. And it wasn't until just a few seconds before impact that the captains of both ships realized what was happening. Here's a rewritten version with an energetic tone and simple language. But here's the shocking part. Even when they knew collision was imminent, these seasoned sailors hesitated, waiting for permission to take action. It was the complete opposite of what they'd been trained to do in high-pressure situations. Tryon's trusted flag captain, Maurice Burke, had actually asked 3 times to reverse engines, but he waited and waited for the green light. Meanwhile, it wasn't until the very last second that Tryon screamed across to Markham, "Go Astern! Go Astern!" But time was up. Panic and confusion took over, and it was too late to avoid the disaster. Here's a rewritten version with an energetic tone and simple language. The moment of truth, it all happened so fast. Both captains finally gave the order to reverse engines, but it was too little too late. Camperdown's massive ram smashed into Victoria's starboard side, piercing 9 feet deep, just 12 feet below the waterline. And here's the twist. With engines still spinning, the ram actually pulled out a bit, creating an even bigger hole and letting in more seawater before the watertight doors could close. 2 minutes after impact, the ship started drifting apart on that sweltering Thursday afternoon when crew rest time was usually all about cool breezes through open hatches. But with a gaping 100-square-foot hole now exposing them to the sea, Tryon and his top officer, Staff Commander Thomas Hawkins Smith, couldn't fathom that their ship could actually go down. Here's a rewritten version with an energetic tone and simple language. The scene shifts. Tryon springs into action. With his crew in danger, he orders Victoria to make for the shore just 5 miles away, aiming to beach her and save the day. Meanwhile, rescue boats are launched from nearby ships, but Tryon's got a plan and signals them to turn back. Just 2 minutes after Camperdown clears out of the hole, waters surge over the deck and flood in through those open hatches. It's a delicate. Amidst the chaos, Lieutenant Herbert Heath leads a team to deploy a collision mat that could plug the gap and slow down the flooding. They're ready to roll it into place, but disaster strikes. They find themselves standing in water before they can even get started. 5 minutes after the catastrophic crash, Victoria's bow is already 15 feet underwater, and she's listing heavily to starboard. The situation looking bleaker by the second. Here's a rewritten version with an energetic tone and simple language. Things are taking a turn for the worse. Water starts pouring through every gun port on Victoria, threatening to engulf her at any moment. Despite the heroic efforts of the engine room crew, who're still churning out power from below deck, disaster strikes. Hydraulic failure cripples the ship's steering, leaving her unable to dodge the inevitable. And if that wasn't enough, no power means no rescue boats can be launched to save those in peril. 8 minutes after the heart-stopping crash, Victoria's fore end is completely submerged and water's lapping at the main deck. It's a dire situation. The stern's now so high out of the water you can see the screws struggling against the air, a stark contrast to the chaos brewing up front. Captain Burke dives below deck to assess the damage and find some hope. Those all-important watertight doors were sealed tight after the initial impact, sparing the engine room from flooding. But in the ship's bow, it's a different story altogether. Here's a rewritten version with an energetic tone and simple language. The situation on board is nothing short of catastrophic. As water pours in through the gun ports, some crew members are swept away while others are trapped behind doors they can't open. In the chaos, there's not enough time to seal off the ship and contain the damage. Every second counts, but it's already too late. Captain Burke rushes back up on deck, ordering his men to prepare for the worst. The sailors quickly assemble, turning to face the side of the ship as they receive their final instruction: abandon ship. But before they can even process what's happening, Victoria suddenly heaves over to starboard, capsizing with a deafening crash that sends everything loose, including the lifeboats, flying off to one side. It's a harrowing end to this tragic tale of a ship gone wrong. Here's a rewritten version with an energetic tone and simple language. The disaster unfolds further as water gushes into Victoria's funnels and sparks deadly explosions when it hits the scorching hot boilers. As she starts to sink, the ship tilts onto her keel, her bow leading the way down. But here's the terrifying part: her propellers are still spinning wildly, posing a deadly threat to anyone in the water nearby. Despite this chaos, most of the crew manages to escape, but tragically, those brave men and women stuck in the engine room don't get the chance to save themselves. They're given no orders to leave their posts and meet a watery grave. Amidst all this heartbreak, one beacon of hope remains Rev. SD stands tall as the ship's chaplain, showing remarkable courage and selflessness during these desperate times. Here's a rewritten version with an energetic tone and simple language. As the drama reaches its peak, we see Rev. Morris RN selflessly fighting to save those who are sick on board. Even as his own time runs out, he goes down with the ship. But what a hero, he was tirelessly working to keep everyone in line until the very end. Now, let's imagine the scene outside. It's like a massive pot of boiling milk churning up foamy bubbles all around the wreck, making it super scary for rescue boats to get close. As time ticks by, fewer and fewer survivors are spotted in the water, and those who do manage to stay alive face some truly horrific challenges. They're swept away by powerful currents and battered by swirling debris. One survivor, Gunner Frederick Johnson, recounts being pulled under 3 times, while another, Lieutenant Lauren, paints a picture of pure chaos as debris is tossed around like crazy, creating an enormous mess on the water's surface. Here's a rewritten version with an energetic tone and simple language. But what about Camperdown, the other ship involved in this epic battle? She took a beating too. Her ram was almost torn off, and water started pouring in through her hull. It was a bad situation. And to make matters worse, the watertight doors hadn't closed fast enough, letting even more water rush in. Now, let's look at the numbers. While an amazing 357 crew members were rescued, sadly, 358 didn't make it. In fact, Collingwood played a life-saving role by providing a rescue boat for the survivors. After the tragedy, a massive search effort was launched, but only 6 bodies could be found right away, and they got a special burial plot from the Sultan of Turkey, near Tripoli. The rest of the people were rushed to Malta for medical help. Here's a rewritten version with an energetic tone and simple language. Let's shine the spotlight on some real heroes. Commander John Jellicoe from Victoria was one of those lucky ones who made it out alive. He even stayed put on top of the chart house as his ship went down. And guess what? A guy named Hawkins Smith stuck by his side, and he's still telling the incredible story today. He talked about feeling the massive force of the sinking and getting tangled up in Victoria's ropes. Interestingly, Hawkins wasn't too sure if their captain, Tryon, could have survived, and that's because Tryon wasn't as fit as him. Fast forward to 2004, after a decade-long search, 2 super brave divers finally found Victoria's wreck. Christian Francis from Lebanon and Austria joined forces with Mark Elliott from the UK to uncover this hidden treasure, and today it lies an astonishing 460 feet underwater. Get ready for some mind-blowing facts. When divers finally found Victoria's wreck, they discovered that its bow, that's the front part of the ship, sank deep into the sand, and almost a third of its massive length is buried underwater. But here's what really took their breath away. As they explored the wreckage, they found intact ammunition still on board. That's right, the guns that were meant to fire explosive rounds are now 100 years old, lying quietly on the seafloor. Victoria was a beast of a ship, rocking 2 enormous 16.25-inch guns in a twin turret, the biggest guns ever mounted on a British battleship back then. Can you believe it? What's even crazier is that this ammunition has somehow managed to stay relatively preserved all these years, which means it still holds its explosive potential. But now it's just a powerless relic of history. So, let's ask ourselves, could all this have been avoided if Captain Tryon had followed the safety rules? Share your thoughts in the comments below. That's all for today, folks. If you dug deep into this piece of history with us, make sure to hit that thumbs up button and show us some love. And if you're new here, consider joining our community by subscribing. We've got an entire treasure trove of edutainment videos waiting just for you. We'll catch you in the next video when we uncover more secrets and share even more fascinating stories. Until then, stay curious and keep exploring.